Hattie stepped inside the warm glow of her family's kitchen, Black Cat close at her heels. With a shiver, she shrugged off her damp coat and hung it on a peg by the door. "Mom? Dad? I'm home," she called out. Silence greeted her. They must still be at work, she realized with a glance at the clock. She looked down at Black Cat, who gazed up at her with luminous yellow eyes. "Well, I guess it's just you and me for now. Let's get you that milk, shall we?" In the quiet house, the gentle clink of a saucer being set on the linoleum seemed amplified. Black Cat lapped the milk delicately while Hattie sank into a kitchen chair with a heavy sigh. Her mind reeled, playing the scene from minutes ago on an endless, sickening loop. Jenna's shove, squealing tires, the awful thud. Shakily, Hattie pressed a hand over her mouth. "It was an accident," she told herself, echoing the words she'd said to Josh. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." But a traitorous voice whispered in her mind that maybe, secretly, darkly, she had wished for something bad to happen to cruel, vicious Jenna. Not death, but comeuppance. Hattie squeezed her eyes shut, trying to blot out the image of Jenna's lifeless stare. The Hectors, so uncharacteristically silent on the walk home, now stirred to life. "It's your fault," they hissed. "You wanted this. You made it happen somehow." "No," Hattie moaned, grasping her head. "It was an accident. I didn't do anything." A soft weight landing in her lap made her gasp and look down. Black Cat kneaded her thighs, purring loudly. Though tears blurred her vision, Hattie could have sworn she saw something like understanding in its uncanny yellow eyes. Stroking its glossy fur with a shaking hand, she felt her heartbeat slow. I couldn't have," she said weakly. Black Cat only purred louder, the vibrations seeming to spread calm through Hattie's body. The clamor of the Hectors faded as she focused on the repetitive motion of petting. Time passed unmarked until the sound of a key in the front door made Hattie start. Black Cat leapt gracefully to the floor as Mum and Dad entered, Teddy trailing behind with his head buried in a notebook. They swept into the kitchen in a gust of cold air, laughing over some shared joke. "Hattie, love, you're home early," Mum said, stopping short at the sight of her daughter's pale face. "Is everything all right?" "An accident," Hattie heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant and papery. "A girl from my old school. She got hit by a car, right in front of me." "Oh, sweetheart." Mum crossed the room in 2 strides and enfolded Hattie in her arms. Hattie breathed in the familiar scent of her perfume and felt like a little girl again, protected from the world's hurts. "How awful. You must have had such a shock." Over Mum's shoulder, Hattie saw Dad and Teddy hovering, twin expressions of concern on their faces. She pulled back, sniffling. "I didn't know her well," she said. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. It happened so fast. I keep seeing it in my head." "Of course you do," Dad said gruffly. He squeezed her shoulder, the rough warmth of his hand steadying her. "Anyone would be shaken up. We're here for you, Hattie girl. Whatever you need." Hot tears pricked Hattie's eyes. She ducked her head, unable to meet her parents' kind gazes. If they knew the whole truth, the years of torment Jenna had put her through, the dark flicker of satisfaction Hattie had felt in the instant before horror set in, would they still look at her with such love? "Thanks," she mumbled. She pulled away from Mum's embrace and stood, avoiding everyone's eyes. "I think I just need to be alone for a bit. Teddy, would you mind looking after the cat? It followed me home." "Cat? What cat?" Mum looked around, perplexed. Hattie frowned. Black Cat had been right there a moment ago, but now the kitchen floor was empty. Maybe it had slipped out when her family came in. Teddy was already crouching, making kissy noises. "Here, kitty kitty," he coaxed. "It's a black cat with a silver collar," Hattie said distractedly. "I'm going to my room." She fled upstairs without waiting for a response. Hattie's room was a safe haven, all cozy quilts and soft lamplight. She collapsed onto her bed and stared at the familiar view of autumn branches scratching at her window. Only this morning, she'd woken up in this bed dreading the day ahead. Sure, she'd have to endure the Hector's running commentary on her every move. How quickly things could change. Now the Hectors were muted, drowned out by the memory of Jenna's blood pooling on the wet tarmac. Hattie felt like she'd aged 10 years in a single day. She tried to summon up an image of Jenna as she'd been that morning, pretty, popular, holding court in the campus coffee shop in a circle of sycophants. But all she could see was the accusation in those dead eyes. A tentative knock sounded at the door. Hattie sighed. "Come in." Teddy peeked around the doorframe. He had a pencil tucked behind one ear and his notebook clutched to his chest like a shield. "Hey," he said, "I couldn't find your cat." "That's okay. I think it left." Hattie felt a pang of disappointment. There had been something comforting about Black Cat's presence. Teddy edged into the room and perched on the end of her bed. He was uncharacteristically hesitant, fiddling with his pencil. "Are you okay?" he asked finally. Hattie opened her mouth to repeat the same half-truth she'd told Mum and Dad, but something in Teddy's guileless gaze stopped her. Her little brother had always been able to see right through her. "No," she admitted. Her voice wavered. "I'm really not. Do you want to talk about it?" Hattie shook her head. The thought of putting words to the tempest inside her was overwhelming. She was afraid that if she started, she might never stop. Teddy nodded. "That's okay," he said. "We can just sit." So they did, side by side on the bed, watching the shadows of the branches dance on the ceiling as evening turned to full dark. The silence should have been uncomfortable, but Teddy had a knack for companionable quiet. With him, Hattie didn't feel pressured to fill the air with forced cheer. After a while, Teddy shifted. Hattie glanced over to see him flipping to a blank page in his notebook. "I've been working on a new story," he said, "about your cat. Want to hear it?" Despite herself, Hattie felt a flicker of curiosity. "My cat? You mean Black Cat? Is that its name?" Teddy sounded delighted. "In my story, it's called Mephi. Sounds like mischief," Hattie remarked. "Oh, it's definitely mischievous, but in a good way. As a witch's familiar, see. Only instead of a wicked old witch, Mephi serves a young girl named Harriet." Hattie felt a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. "Harriet, huh?" It seemed fitting. Anyway, Harriet is an apprentice witch, but she's having a tough time. The other young witches all laugh at her because she hasn't inherited the family knack for magic. She tries and tries, but her potions always come out wonky and her spells fizzle. "Sounds frustrating," Hattie said. "It is." And her mom, who's this super powerful witch, just shakes her head and says, "Keep practicing. You'll get it." But Harriet starts to wonder if maybe there's something wrong with her. Maybe she's just not meant to be a witch. The story was starting to feel uncomfortably familiar. Hattie shifted on the bed. "So what happens?" "Well, one day Harriet is in the woods gathering herbs, feeling really down on herself, when she comes across this black cat caught in a hunter's trap. She kind of knows she's not supposed to mess with wild animals, but she can't just leave it there. So she magics the trap open, even though it takes a bunch of tries. And let me guess, the cat turns out to be magic?" Teddy grinned. "Got it in one. The cat tells her that it's been watching her, and it thinks she's got the makings of a great witch. She just needs to believe in herself. It offers to be her familiar and help guide her in her magic." "That's a nice thought," Hattie said wistfully. "Right? But here's the thing, it's not the cat that's magic, not really. I mean, yes, it can talk, and it seems to always show up right when Harriet needs it. But the real magic is in Harriet. She just needed a friend to help her see that." Hattie had a sudden memory of Black Cat winding around her legs at the bus stop, how the Hectors had fallen silent at its touch. "Teddy," she said slowly, "this is going to sound crazy, but do you think magic could be real? Like, really real?" Teddy tilted his head, considering. "I think there's a lot in this world that we don't understand," he said finally. "And I think that the things we believe have a power all their own. So in a way, magic is as real as you make it." A laugh escaped Hattie. Trust Teddy to come out with something so profound and yet so perfectly him. She reached over and ruffled his hair. "When did you get so wise, Squirt?" He ducked away, grinning. I've always been wise. You just never listened before. Growing serious again, he added, I really am here if you want to talk. You know, about anything. Hattie's chest tightened. I know, she said around the lump in her throat. Thank you. After a moment, Teddy bounced to his feet. I'm going to write more of Harriet's story, he announced. I think Mephi is going to give her an extra special spell to fix a problem. Like a spell to send bad dreams away, or a spell to make bullies trip over their own feet. He was out the door before the implication of his words sank in. Hattie stared after him, mind churning. Surely he didn't know what had happened with Jenna. He couldn't, could he? But what were the odds he'd mention a bully tripping right after Hattie had watched Jenna go sprawling in front of that car? No. It had to be a coincidence. Teddy was uncannily perceptive, but he wasn't a mind reader. Still, as Hattie curled up under her quilt, she couldn't shake the prickly feeling that the universe was trying to tell her something. Sleep was a long time coming that night. Every time Hattie closed her eyes, she saw Jenna's face. Not dead and accusing, but alive and laughing as she sauntered through the halls of their old school. In the not-so-distant past, that laugh had been directed at Hattie more times than she could count. Jenna had made a sport of tormenting her, enlisting her gang of sycophants to join in the fun. Fatty Hattie, they chanted, pimply faces split with malicious glee. Hattie the heifer, hefty Hattie. The memories made Hattie cringe. Even now, she yanked the quilt over her head as if she could block them out. She deserved it, hissed the voice of the Hectors. They'd been quiet for hours, but now they slithered out of the depths of Hattie's mind, eager to whisper poison in her ear. You know she did. The way she treated you? She had it coming. Shut up, Hattie gritted. I didn't want her to die. I never wanted that. But the Hectors would not be silenced so easily. Liar, they said. You wished for something bad to happen to her. You wanted to teach her a lesson. Tears leaked from the corners of Hattie's eyes, tracing hot trails down her temples to dampen the pillow. It was true that she'd fantasized about Jenna getting her comeuppance. How many times had she imagined the skinny blonde falling on her bony butt, or opening her locker to find something slimy and wriggling? But those had been idle daydreams, no more substantial than smoke. Hattie would never have wished real harm on anyone, not even her worst enemy. Would she? This isn't my fault, she whispered into the darkness. I didn't make it happen. But a tiny seed of doubt had sprouted in her mind, fed by the Hector's malicious whispering. After all, wasn't it an awfully big coincidence that Jenna had tripped at just the right moment to end up in the path of Josh's car? And what about Black Cat, the strange creature that had shadowed Hattie all day, only to disappear when the deed was done? A creeping, cold dread seeped into Hattie's veins. What if Teddy was right? What if magic was real? What if, in some twisted way, Hattie really had made Jenna's accident happen? No. The thought was too terrible to contemplate. Sickened, Hattie shoved back the covers and stumbled out of bed. She needed air. She needed to get out of this room, away from the clamoring voices in her head. The house was dark and silent as Hattie crept downstairs, but she knew its layout by heart. In the kitchen, she fumbled for the switch on the kettle and slumped against the counter as it burbled to life. There. Tea would help. The ritual motions of brewing a cuppa had always been a comfort, a touchstone of normalcy. She was just fishing a tea bag out of the box when a flash of movement outside the window made her yelp. Heart pounding, she leaned closer to peer through her dim reflection in the glass. Two yellow eyes stared back. You? Hattie breathed. She unlatched the back door and pushed it open. Cold air rushed in, raising goosebumps on her bare arms. I thought you'd gone. Black Cat sat in a pool of shadow on the back steps. The gleam of its silver collar was the only thing distinguishing its silhouette from the night. Slowly, deliberately, it blinked up at her. Hattie sank to sit on the top step, the damp chill of the concrete seeping through her pajama pants. Black Cat immediately climbed into her lap, soundless and boneless in that uncanny way of cats. It was heavier than it looked. I'm going mad, Hattie told it. Now that she was talking, she found she couldn't stop. The words poured out of her in a torrent. I think I might have killed Jenna, With my mind. Because I wanted bad things to happen to her, and then they did. But that's impossible. It has to be impossible. Magic isn't real. Even as she said it, doubt crept in. Hadn't impossible things been happening all day? The way Black Cat kept appearing, as if it could teleport. The eerie timing of Jenna's fall. The Hectors, silenced where nothing else had been able to shut them up. Black Cat purred, a deep rumble that Hattie felt in her bones. She clutched the cat tighter, focused on the vibration, the warm weight in her arms. The night was so still, she imagined she could hear the thrum of magic in the air, the whisper of dreams and secrets carried on the wind. And yet, underneath it all, the mundane sounds of home, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the boiler, the distant whoosh of a car passing on the main road. "I'm not a witch," Hattie said out loud, testing the shape of the words. Black Cat's purr intensified, as if in agreement. But something happened today. Something had happened today that Hattie couldn't explain. Something that felt an awful lot like magic. But magic wasn't real, was it? As if sensing her confusion, Black Cat shifted in her lap, butting its head up under her chin. Its silky fur tickled her skin, grounding her. Hattie took a shaky breath. "Okay," she said. "Let's assume, just for a minute, that magic is real. And that somehow I made Jenna trip. With my mind. Because I was angry at her. And I wished for something bad to happen. But I never meant for her to get hurt, not really. I would take it back if I could. I don't want that kind of power. I don't want to be responsible for something so awful." Hot tears burned behind her eyes. Hattie blinked hard, letting them fall into Black Cat's fur. It didn't seem to mind, only snuggled closer, purring like a motor. "What do I do now?" Hattie whispered. "If I really did this, how can I ever trust myself again? How can I live with the guilt?" There were no easy answers. But as she sat there on the steps, the night pressing close around her, Hattie knew one thing for certain. She couldn't keep this bottled up inside. The secret would eat her alive, gnawing at her like the Hectors with their poison words. She needed to talk to someone, mom and dad maybe, or a counselor. Someone who could help her sort through the tangled mess of her feelings and figure out a way forward. "I have to tell the truth," she said, tasting the shape of the words. "Even if no one believes me about the magic, I have to come clean about what happened with Jenna. I owe her that much." It was a terrifying thought. People would judge her, whisper about her, maybe even hate her. The truth could cost her dearly. But the alternative, living a lie, always wondering if her darkest impulses would manifest again, was far worse. Hattie took a deep breath, then stood, gently setting Black Cat down. It wound around her ankles, tail curling bracelet-like against her skin. For a moment, Hattie could have sworn the silver of its collar gleamed with an otherworldly light. "Thank you," she told it, "for being here, for listening. I don't know if you really are magic, or if I'm just losing my mind, but I think you helped me figure out what I need to do." Black Cat blinked slow yellow eyes, inscrutable as a sphinx. Then, swift and silent, it turned and bounded off into the night, its black shape quickly swallowed up by the dark. Hattie watched it go, her head clearer than it had been all evening. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew now what she had to do. Squaring her shoulders, she went back inside to wait for dawn. The next morning, Hattie sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea long gone cold. She'd been awake most of the night, rehearsing what she would say, but the words still stuck in her throat like burrs. Mum came in first, wrapped in her fluffy robe, hair still mussed from sleep. She stopped short at the sight of Hattie, her forehead creasing with concern. "You're up early, love. Did you sleep at all? How are you feeling?" The gentle questions undid her. Hattie crumpled, a sob tearing its way out of her chest. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. About yesterday. About Jenna." And it all came pouring out. The years of bullying, the cruel nicknames, the shoves and slaps and petty humiliations. Hattie spoke through her tears, the words tumbling over each other in their rush to be free. She told Mum about the awful satisfaction she'd felt when Jenna tripped, the dark voice in her mind that whispered Jenna deserved it. And she told her about the cat, the strange and impossible cat that had been there through it all, the cat that had vanished into thin air and reappeared like a ghost. By the time she was finished, Dad and Teddy had joined them, hovering wide-eyed in the doorway. Hattie braced herself for their shock, their disgust, their anger. She deserved all of it and more. But Mum only gathered her close, stroking her hair like she had when Hattie was small. "My darling," she murmured, "I am so sorry you went through all of that alone. But you need to know, this wasn't your fault." "That's right," Dad said gruffly. He lowered himself into the chair beside her and gripped her hand. "You didn't make that accident happen, Hattie girl. No matter what that nasty little voice in your head is saying." "Jenna was a bully," Teddy piped up. Fierce loyalty shone in his eyes. "She hurt you for years. It's normal to feel angry about that, to want karma to bite her in the butt. But thoughts aren't magic. You didn't cause this by wishing for it." Fresh tears coursed down Hattie's cheeks. She didn't deserve this compassion, this steadfast support, but she leaned into it all the same. It was like Black Cat's purr, a balm to her ragged soul. "I still feel responsible," she whispered. "If the accident hadn't happened right after our fight." "Jenna made her own choices," Mum said firmly. "She chose to torment you all those years. She chose to confront you on that street and push you into traffic. Those actions are on her, not you." Hattie shook her head, but the hard knot in her chest was beginning to loosen. They were right, she realized. Hating herself, blaming herself, that wouldn't undo what had been done. It would only give Jenna more power, make her a victim all over again. She sucked in a shuddering breath. I think I need help," she said, "to deal with all of this. I don't want Jenna or the Hectors to have a hold over me anymore. I want to learn how to be kind to myself." It came out small and shaky, but it felt like the bravest thing she'd ever said. Mum's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Then we'll get you that help," she vowed. "We'll find you someone to talk to. You're not alone in this. We're here, and we love you, and we'll face it together as a family." She punctuated her words by reaching out to pull Teddy into their embrace. For a long moment they stayed like that, holding each other, breathing in sync. The Hectors were still there, still whispering, but their voices seemed fainter, drowned out by the strength of her family's love. When at last they pulled apart, Teddy caught Hattie's eye. "Did you really see a magic cat?" he asked. Despite herself, Hattie felt her mouth quirk. Trust Teddy to zero in on the most fantastical part of her tale. "I don't know if it was magic," she said slowly, "but it was definitely different, special somehow. It sounds daft, but I felt like it was trying to help me, in its own way." Teddy's eyes gleamed. "I bet it was your familiar," he said with relish. "Like Mephi in my story. It came to guide you through a dark time, to help you find your own power." "Maybe so," Hattie allowed. She thought of luminous yellow eyes, the flash of a silver collar in the dark. Magic or not, Black Cat had appeared when she needed it most. A guardian, a witness, a friend. Hattie sent up a silent thank you. In the difficult days and weeks that followed, as she grieved and grappled with her guilt, Hattie held tight to the memory of that strange and fateful day. Whenever the Hectors got too loud, she would close her eyes and imagine a warm weight in her lap, a deep purr vibrating through her bones. She never saw Black Cat again, but sometimes, on the edge of sleep, Hattie imagined she felt the brush of soft fur against her cheek, and the whisper of a voice in her mind. Not the cruel hiss of the Hectors, but something older and wiser, edged with mischief. It told her to be brave, to be kind, to believe in her own magic. And in time, Hattie learned to listen.